Hi, I'm Karen Joan Watson. I'm an eco-artist and author, and I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. My earliest memory is really clear because we grew up in the Gatineau Hills in the summers near my grandfather, or staying with my grandfather until we had a cottage. And we just were allowed to go out and roam. And I found that I was attracted to the birch trees and the branches and the stones. And I would make little, not really a spiral, more of a cairn. And I just did it. I didn't think about it. I didn't call attention to it. It just was. And the same within the water with the stones, just moving them around so that the water washed in differently. And I was mesmerized by the glinting of the sun off the water, and closing my eyes and having that kind of pure ruby red as I swam. So there was just so much material and natural phenomenon to appreciate growing up that way. And going up in the winter time with the in the woods and all the snow everywhere. So the contrast with the city, I think I really came alive in the Gatineau Hills. And it wasn't until I was older and I was making things in a studio, and I'd been curious about cairns. My mother had taken us for walks up to King Mountain, and there were cairns along the way that were geological posts. And I started to research it a little bit, and I thought, oh, other cultures have used this building of stones. And I began to realize, oh, there's a connection to when I was a child. And that was something that I just did. I was the oldest of a tribe of 7 kids, and we moved all the time. So I was the big sister, the protector, the deputy, and I learned languages easily, like my father. And so when we moved somewhere where we didn't speak the language, within a couple of weeks, I picked it up. And for example, in Germany, and my parents would use me as a translator. Even though I didn't understand what language was, I just thought, they would ask me, "You're speaking German." And I said, "No, I'm not." And they said, "Well, you're talking to Gabriella, and Gabriella doesn't speak any English." I said, "Yes, she does." And they said, well, we want to figure out how to get screens on our windows. So how does Gabriella say window? I'd say, well, Fenster. I didn't, so language was part of an introduction to each place we went to. And there were some places that just resonated more than others. And I think that has informed and nurtured my curiosity and my work, the eco art, for example. Well, we lived in a small village, so there wasn't really much city. And we were surrounded by countryside, and we spent a lot of time outdoors. And then when we came back to Canada, we were in Montreal and Ottawa, but we would go back to visit my grandfather at Kingsmere and eventually stay there all summer with a small cottage of our own. And just being surrounded by, I'm very inspired by tall birches, and we were lucky enough to have them all over the land nearby. And stone, I guess it's the Canadian shield. So when later I was planning, I entered a competition for Ireland, and I was describing the work I was going to do using the natural materials, the local materials of wood and stone. I had been to that part of Ireland before, and I realized it was very much like the Gatineau Hills. And a lot of the same materials, water, streams, rivers. It brought back so many memories, and I found the links from when I was a child. I was able to incorporate that original desire to create things. What's funny is I just did my genealogy, 97% Celtic. which makes sense because, again, going to Ireland and seeing so much that was familiar, like the Canadian Shield and in Canada, but also the rhythm of the language and exploring some of the ancient stone and outcroppings that were made for various purposes, and that, you know, the ones where once a year the light goes right down through the chamber of the stones. So I don't know that I'm overtly using Celtic symbolism, but I'm very aware of it, and I'm studying and learning more. The whole use of cairns, you know, the Scottish use of cairns, the Irish use. Whenever I've read about it, I think, yes. They're markers, there's meaning, they're full of meaning, and they're usually created from what is right there in order to either point people in the right direction or leave a message, or there can be a lot of meaning to it. When I was in Ireland with the Sculpture Society of Ireland, there were 6 artists, and 2 of us really wanted to complete our personal project. Mine was in the water with stones, and the other artist worked with water and stones. And then we were asked to do a group project. And there were about 40 children who followed me around all the time, little kids. And at first I thought, oh, am I going back to being the oldest sister with running a little day camp? And then I realized with their questions about the stones and about the cairns that it was an opportunity to share with them my curiosity. And they were local materials. So I was working with the stones, the water, and the local materials of a whole bunch of little kids. So I don't know if I've sent you that picture, but I worked on various projects with them and then told them I'm going to go and work a little bit down the river. I'll be able to see you. Is that okay? And meanwhile, they worked on, it looked like the remnants of foundations of castles and all kinds of things in the water that the children were building. And I thought it's a similar kind of desire to create out of what is there, just to rearrange it, just to make it into something that doesn't permanently alter the landscape. So my footprint is usually pretty light. You know, the pieces begin to go back into the earth or back into the water. I don't glue things together. I don't look at a way to cement them. I like that they eventually go back into the earth and the grass grows over it. And even searching for it, they're hard to find. The way traces are of our Aboriginal communities, of our pioneer and settler communities, you know, where you find those traces. So in a way, I guess we're recreating some of the traces. But it was wonderful working with the kids. Their enthusiasm was great. And they came with me into the water. And first we cleaned up. There was a lot of junk that people had thrown off bridges. And it got to the point where the children would say, hey, don't throw that stuff. We're working here. This is a beautiful river. And there was an awareness of the beauty of it, a celebration, really. Well, the reason I was working in the government was because at 35 and 40, I had two children with my Italian husband, and one of us needed to have dental insurance. And so it was a practical reason to give stability to the family. And I found that mothering felt like one huge creative project. And I knew ahead of time, because I'd done so much caregiving to my siblings, that mothering was an important job if you decide to make it so. And so I decided that in terms of a real project, I was going to do 20, 25 years of focusing on raising healthy, beautiful children and caring for them in a practical way. So I would draw. I would draw them when they slept, usually, or I would try to do like a journal. I would do a daily self-portrait because I was there. It was easy to get me to model, and I could do it quickly, or I could take my time if they were asleep or I got up early. So when we went up into the Gatineaus, I would rearrange things, but I took very few pictures, and I didn't exhibit very much, just occasionally with a women artists group here in Ottawa, the Green Door group. I had exhibited with them a lot before I had children in the 80s and 90s. And we continued to get together, but on a smaller scale. There were exhibitions all the way through the 20 years or 25 years that I raised the children with my husband, and now my second husband, who helped a lot. But my artwork was more at a personal level, almost like a diary kind of artwork. If I felt moved to do so, I would go and play in the water while we were there. I didn't exhibit much about that. And really, until I met you in 2014, I hadn't thought much about sharing that with other people. Because when you do site-specific work out in the country, it's a whole different thing than bringing something back to the gallery, or a photo, or, that Millennium Project with the crown of thorns at the base of it for KAAI in Kingston. They took photos. We took photos. I took photos over the seasons as the piece started to go back into the earth. And it was one of the few Millennium projects that was allowed to stay after the first year. It was allowed to stay because it was not affecting the Cataraqui Creek, Little Cataraqui Creek conservation principles, because I had just used what I found. I used sisal to bind some of the wood, and as the snow fell after I'd created it in the spring, and the grasses came up in the summer, it just began to look like a different piece every time over the years. And in 2000, we celebrated at the gallery with pictures, and I think there's a book about it. Modern Fuel is the name of the gallery in Kingston now. But the Millennium Project was every year, artists came and worked in the Little Cataraqui Creek Conservation Area and created. It was a fantastic experience. I had just had my first daughter, and I was rather fascinated with her, and am still. But at the time, I remember thinking, my life is so full, having created this other little human being. And it was really interesting creating in Ireland when I was pregnant, and then in Kingston with this toddler. The sense of creation really does enlarge your idea of what creating is, and nurturing a spirit in yourself and in others is it's different. And yet that sense of creation is very similar, very satisfying. Before I had children at 33, I happened to have a change in family doctor. For years, I'd been told I had a heart murmur, and it was, oh, it's nothing. For many years, every time they say, oh, it's nothing. So this new doctor at 33 said, you know, you have a heart murmur. And then she kept examining me. I thought, well, this is different. She sent me for a test. And to make a longer story short, they found out that I did have a birth heart defect. And we were part of a study at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute. And they found my father had the same thing and was about to have open heart surgery, but didn't know the cause. And then we found that other family members have had similar or linked heart things. All of us, by the way, have come through and felt renewed afterwards, after surgery. But it was scary, you know, wondering whether I'd be okay to give birth. The real scare was, would I be able to be there for my children until adulthood, where I could say, you know, fly, little bird, and launch them. And this is the best lottery in the world, Leanna, to have two adult, strong, beautiful daughters, and know that that work, that project of intense nurturing, that part of it's done. And then I had the heart operation. And I was ready if it was time to go. I'd spent 27 years practicing breathing and listening and appreciating the sunlight and appreciating the chance to create. And then I survived it, got stronger, and a year ago had a burst of energy, and I'm feeling extremely creative again with very few responsibilities to others except caregiving for my mother. Well, I started a website, kjwatson.ca, where I wrote you that I was looking for a kind of unifying principle, because I've always written in a journal, I've always drawn, I've always built little things or bigger things. And I wanted to have a place where I could put a portfolio, and I have a heart blog. So I have writing and artwork. And in the artwork side, I think I'm going more in the direction of working outdoors with eco art, because I love it. And there's something beautiful about the ephemeral nature of eco art. And but also I've just become a co-author of an internationally best-selling book called Voices of the 21st Century, Resilient Women Who Rise and Make a Difference. And I wrote my heart story in there called The Answer Is to Be. So the writing part is, I worked in communications most of my career in the government and in marketing, and have been writing all my life, but it's sort of fun to be published and to share the book. I still do self-portraits, but I haven't done, no, I guess I haven't. I haven't done paintings in a long time. Occasionally I'll draw my husband or someone who's around me. And as I said, I use the face in the mirror as an easy subject. It's not really a focus. And I don't do masks anymore. I worked for years making masks, either just masks for fun or for a theater group, for example, or for the Children's Museum of the Canadian Museum of Civilization, as it used to be called, of history now. And I made hundreds of masks. But when I had finished a leather mask making course in Italy, I felt that, except for a few other small projects with masks, I'd kind of explored that enough. So it may just be that the portraits are something that I'll go back to or not. I'll probably, if I live long enough, and I'm lucky enough to live healthy long enough, I'll need another revalve job, as we call it in the heart community. But remember when Mick Jagger had a similar condition, and he was lucky enough to get the new technology. So I expect to live quite a few years. It is a regeneration, and I'm appreciating it. I'm appreciating all this energy and the curiosity that comes with it. I think the first 2 years, I tried to go back to work. I worked part-time. I was exhausted. I'd been exhausted before the surgery, but this was a new thing where I needed to sleep up to 14 hours a day. So my recovery was slow. I felt very good, but then I would drop off in energy and need to lie down and sleep. So they're grateful that I'm alive and that I have a future, and we're very close. But I think what's fun for them is seeing me go back to my overtly artistic self. You know, as a writer and manager in the government, I would sometimes bring home copies of some of the neat stuff I did, like that For the Love of Books that I sent you, a magazine for teacher librarians in Canada. And I wrote a love letter to the library. And I thought of my kids underneath the blankets reading, and myself. But I don't think it meant that much to them. They saw me as someone who went out the door to a job. And now they're beginning to see me as someone who used to be a really active artist and who is showing them that that's important to me again. I think they're proud of me. I have a friend who's always painted texture, and you know, there are different kinds of painting technique where you can make it look smooth, 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 or make the paint actually be a character in the painting. I'm more like that. So you're right. Texture, well, a keen sense of touch, a keen sense of ambiance, and the feel of warmth on my skin and the sense of roughness. So, and also keenly the visual. So growing up in the woods in the summers and visiting my grandfather off and on all year the rest of the time, we just played outside and it was all around us to appreciate. So I think those of us who have a more sensitive artistic nature tend to notice and tend to enjoy, reach out for, and then play with. And so all these textures were around me. And with protection of the trees, we were taught never to strip the bark of the birch, but wait for it to be hanging off and cut it off. and we'd write each other letters and fit them into stones and play with what existed. And because we got to be outdoors all year round in different seasons, and as I say, when we visited my grandfather, we were told, go outside, enjoy it. And then growing up every summer with my mother, who had lived out in the country, and her favorite thing was to build fires. So she taught us each how to build a fire safely. So not only do I like water and earth and wood and the sky and the clouds, but I love fire. So, and the stones that, I guess, when you're walking around in your bare feet all summer, you feel it. You feel the different textures. You don't just see them. Your feet get tougher, and your toes grip over the stones as you're climbing. It's I think it leads to an awareness and enhances an awareness of what's around us. And Leanna, you asked about the heart influencing me. I think from 33 years old, I looked at the world differently. It's a bit of a shock to realize that you can die anytime, which is a truth. But it made me stop and smell roses, look at stones, hold things, hold alabaster, and feel the temperature and the texture and the smell and how it looked in different light for it. And I was brought up by a traditionally Catholic father and less traditional mother. And I thought for myself quite young that I would need to look for my own way of being. And part of that is definitely the pantheism, the universe and our earth, and an awareness of how things fit together and matrix and how it moves as time changes and as water goes through it, or as it rains, or as it floods, or all the different. I found that I moved away from traditional spirituality to something that I had realized when I was quite young, that I just felt a connection and felt a sureness. But after my heart and being raised that way, where it was sort of taken for granted that we would be outside. But after the heart diagnosis at 33, I definitely chose to appreciate now and to feel the pain of now as well. And that was a decision that felt like a spiritual choice. And I tried to nurture that in myself and with others. Yeah, as a big sister, the protector, and the camp leader. Whenever we moved, we'd be thrown outside. My mother loved fresh air. She always had the windows really open, even in the winter. And she'd say, go out, just go out. And so until we got to know people in the neighborhood, we'd kind of create our own fun. And I think when I was younger, though, I didn't appreciate, it was like my job. From when I was about 3, I was looking after someone. And there were always smaller, vulnerable creatures around. And it was just, you look after them, you do stuff with them. And it took me a while to realize that I actually had an influence on them and I needed to be careful with what I said and what I did. It took me quite a while to realize that. And I had my father's energy and his heart, and I had my mother's. I learned from my mother the understanding of other people and taking into consideration other people. And there's a spirituality to that as well. And it all feels connected to, my fingertips if I'm holding someone or comforting someone, or if I'm feeding a baby, or if I'm building something, especially in the water, or especially near fire, or in the earth. I've never really been afraid of death per se. It's more been at different times leaving those that still needed some help. Like creating children when you know that you might not make it through their childhood. That's a risky business. It's a risky business making children in this world anyway. So that was a definite fear, that I might not be around to help guide them and love them. I don't have that many fears, although I'm afraid of sharks, and I think a healthy fear, but I built sharks back when I was in university, and built sharks for Mexicali Roses, a restaurant that's on Dow's Lake here in Ottawa. And that paid for me to go off to Italy and continue my love story with Italy. This piece behind is called Walking Naked and Alive Through Florence. And I don't know if you can see, but there are kind of ghostly figures in the back. And they were people that I encountered and meant a lot to me. And some of the paintings from Botticelli or Michelangelo's David, or, one of the bridges, the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. So as a child, I had a piano teacher who was an older lady who was very kind, and she was teaching me about Mozart, who was also 5 years old when he was playing piano in quite a different manner. So I was 5, and she was teaching me the notation at the top of the music. And she said, this is pianissimo, and sforzando, and larghetto. And I said, oh, I pronounced them with her. And she said, you're speaking like someone who speaks Italian. And I said, what's Italian? And remember my I don't speak German thing when I was a kid. Language just didn't mean anything particularly. But she said, that's Italian. And I said, oh, I'm going to go where I can hear Italian. So I made a commitment to go to Italy. And when I finally put my first step down in Florence, it was reverberations of belonging in that place. Subsequently, I've been back many times and worked at a well-known European art center just outside Padua, near Venice, very close to Venice, and met my first husband there, and did masks, leather mask making, and soaked in the beauty. And we've been back many times with our children, and the children have embraced their Italian heritage and go back and visit what we call the Italians in the family. Well, we're going back to see the Italians. So there's a sense of belonging there and wonder. your comment about that must have been an introvert. Most people who know me laugh at that because when I'm with people, I'm pretty engaged. But I love being alone. And it's odd to say it, but I have loved being cut off from many things that I usually do. And it has allowed me to think and explore and do a lot more writing, playing with paint. We haven't been outside very much, although last summer we were up at Kingsmere again, and just playing with stones in the water again was lovely, but with a reduced social agenda. I did a drawing I sent you of myself masked just because I came in from something and I thought, oh, I don't see myself like this very often. So I just did a drawing and I used my left hand because it was loose and it reduces expectations of what it's going to look like. And I thought, this masked way of being is so strange for us all. To me, we've had to exhibit more care for each other, which I like. But at the same time, I get to have more time to myself. And I'm rediscovering, along with having more energy and being retired from my government marketing manager job, I think I needed a fallow period, a quiet period, to feel like creating. It's bubbling up again. And I'm dying to get out to the Gatineau Hills this summer because we've been COVID cautious and not crossed the river when we've been in red zones, or the Gatineau Hills side, the Outaouais has been in red zone. So we haven't been over at all, and I really miss it. It's 25 minutes away. It does feel far away, though my uncle and aunt, my brother, my cousin, good friends live there, and we're in touch. But not to go up and smell the air and breathe it in. That's something that from when I was 33, that was a big thing. And that might have a link to the spirituality aspect of just breathing in, feeling the energy go to my toes and my fingers. And having this quiet period has allowed me to reinforce this going back to the creative principle. I have a few different projects on the go, Leanna. I love mystery novels, and I have a few mysteries in me, possibly even a series. One that I'm working on is memories and triggered memories of the late 1500s, the 16th century in Italy, outside Padua and Venice and Florence, along with memoir of travels there and living there, and using the Gatineau Hills as a background to another one, the Toth Lake mystery series I'm working on. I'm working on that in little pieces with different writing workshops where we have a chance to write for 15 minutes, and I'll put myself into a character's space and mind and write. So sometimes it comes out as poetry and sometimes as prose. And I write in a journal where I can kind of write about anything, rant. I don't know if you know The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, but I always loved that idea that she was struggling as a writer, as a journal, writing her journal, living her life, creating alternate fictions, and she was trying to bring a story into one golden notebook. So I'm thinking about that. And of course, my sister-in-law, who's an editor and publisher and a go-getter, convinced me to participate in her fourth book, this Voices of the 21st Century. And this one is Resilient Women Who Rise and Make a Difference. And I didn't know what to write at first. I thought about writing about caregiving for my mother, which is very important to me and to our family. But the heart story, I hadn't told it and I hadn't shared it, and it was risky. And it's risky in a similar way to sharing something you created, artwork, because people come and they respond to things in their own way. People respond to what we put out there of ourselves, and it can be rough and it can be really empowering. So it's been wonderful sort of being pushed into actually getting something published. I like it. Thank you. It's beautiful. And this is the personalized copy. That's my sister-in-law right there, Gail Watson. So my story in here is called The Answer Is to Be. I wait for the surgeon to crack open my breastbone, to break my heart and save me. 27 years before, when I was 33, my new family doctor listened to my heart with concern. She sent me to a cardiologist who explained that I have a congenital heart defect, a bicuspid aortic valve. Once I develop symptoms, without surgery, I'll be dead within 2 years. I'm going to skip through. The whole mortality thing just got real. I make changes. I practice calming the mind, doing yoga, tai chi, and meditation, and I strengthen my heart and body muscles with weights and cardio. I love well and make 2 wonderful babies with my Italian husband at the time. I write and draw when I can. I prepare a will. I work hard and feel tired and stressed. I worry that my children will grow up without a mother, so I treasure each moment. The heart surgery is scheduled. They knock me out and put me on a heart-lung machine that pumps and breathes for me. The surgeon saws through my breastbone, cuts open my heart, and slices out the calcified aortic valve. I wake up in the ICU. How do you feel, they ask me. Dazed, I say. Not a medical term, but exactly how I feel. On day 3, I code. I almost die from heart block. Alarms ring all over the Heart Institute as I fall backwards down a long, dark tunnel. I'm calm as I drift away. On day 5, I stabilize. My instinct is to stay sane. The doctor says I can leave the hospital the next day if I'm ready. My family and friends freak out. On day 6, I ace the readiness tests. Muscle training for 27 years pays off. I climbed 2 flights of stairs 2 days after coding. For months, I cry as much as I sleep. I grieve, letting go of fear of the hospital, of fear of dying before my kids are grown. I share with my cardiac rehab friends and women at Heart Sisters. There is a dying of habit, a quieting, then a sweet, slow rebirth. I answer an important question. To be? Oh, yes. But I'm so lucky to have energy and very little responsibility right now. Although my mom has been going through a really hard week. But I think she's coming out of it okay. I mention her in my book, or at the end of the story. Where is it? Oh, I call my mother every day and ask what's new, and she always says, I'm alive. I check if she's taken her pills, and sometimes she talks about the boy she kissed when she was young. This is precious to me. So I'm going to write about her. She's one of my, she's, I'm going to do something about her.